I was 76 the afternoon my son, David, sat across from me at my own kitchen table and told me, slowly like you talk to a toddler, that maybe it was time I stopped handling my complicated finances. I remember the way the sunlight came through the blinds, striping his face like prison bars, and I remember thinking, he's rehearsed this. You'd think a father would notice something like that, but betrayal always sneaks in wearing your child's voice. It was June 4th, 2022, around 2 in the afternoon, and the air smelled like burnt coffee because I'd forgotten the pot on the warmer. I didn't correct him when he pointed it out. I didn't correct him about anything that day. I let him believe it, every stutter, every pause, every fumbling reach for a word. I let him see what he wanted to see, what he needed to see, what made him bold. "You're forgetting a lot lately, Dad," he said, folding his hands like a man about to pray. "It's nothing to be ashamed of." I just nodded. "Maybe you're right." You should have seen the way his eyes softened, relieved, as if my confusion was a gift he'd been hoping for. In a way, it was. I watched that look, memorized it, filed it away for the day I'd use it against him. That moment, right there, in my own kitchen in Tacoma, was when I knew he'd already taken something. Only guilty men talk that gently. I didn't know it was $60,000 yet. I didn't know he'd been moving it piece by piece from my checking and retirement account into an online fund I'd never heard of. And I didn't know he'd started 6 months earlier, right around the time I'd had that small stroke and the doctor mentioned cognitive monitoring. What I did know, what I felt in my bones that day, was that my own son believed he could gaslight me out of my life. "What kind of things have you noticed me forgetting?" I asked him, rubbing the side of my head like something hurt. Truth was, it did hurt. Not my memory, my dignity. He smiled the kind of smile you give someone who's already lost. "Little things, bills, dates, conversations we've had, nothing big yet, but it's coming, Dad. I've been reading up." I let my voice tremble. "I don't want to be a burden." "You won't be," he said quickly. "That's why I think I should take over your accounts now, just to make sure everything stays stable." There it was, the first real crack in his mask. My hand shook on purpose as I slid my checkbook toward him. "Maybe it's time," I said. "You've always been good with numbers." He reached for that checkbook like it was holy scripture. He wasn't thinking about me, not even a little. He was thinking about access, power. He was thinking about what else he could move without me noticing. When he left an hour later, he patted my shoulder. "I'm proud of you for admitting this." I waited until the door closed, until his truck pulled out of the driveway, until the white noise of the neighborhood filled the house again. Then I stood up straight. My hands didn't shake anymore. My mind wasn't foggy. My memory was clear as glass. You're probably thinking, why didn't I stop him right there? Why didn't I confront him? Because confrontation punishes the crime. But patience punishes the criminal. I wanted to see how far he'd go. And he went far, too far. 3 weeks later, after I'd played the part of the confused old man better than any actor on television, the letter arrived from Columbia Federal Bank. A routine notice about recent activity. I opened it standing by my kitchen sink, the metal cool against my hip, and as my eyes scanned those withdrawals, each a little larger than the last, I felt something in me harden. Somewhere between the monthly auto payments and the new transfers I didn't authorize sat the truth. My son believed I was slipping away. He believed I wouldn't notice. He believed $50 dips would grow to $100 dips, then $1,000 ones, and I'd just blink through it like a man whose mind was fading. One line stopped me cold. Total transfers to external account ending 4421, $60,000. I sat down right there on the linoleum. The letter shook in my hands, but not from fear. I felt shame, sure. Rage, absolutely. But mostly, I felt a kind of stillness I hadn't known since my army days. The stillness a man feels before he commits to something that will change everything. That day, I made a promise. Not out loud, just silently, the way a father makes promises that aren't meant to be broken. I promised I would let him keep thinking I was slipping. I promised I would let him hang himself with every lie. And I promised I would take back every single dollar, even if I had to crawl. I whispered it to the empty room. "David, you picked the wrong old man." And that was the moment the real story began. Before everything went to hell, life was quiet in a way a man my age learns to appreciate. I lived in a small rambler off 64th Street in Tacoma, the same house my late wife, Margaret, and I bought back in '88. The siding needed painting, the gutters sagged in winter, and the furnace rattled whenever it kicked on, but it was mine. Paid off. Earned. Every inch of that place held some memory of raising my two kids, Sarah with her gap-toothed smile, and David, back when he used to run to me instead of away from responsibility. Most mornings before the stroke, I'd wake up at 6:15, like I had for 30 years at the paper mill, even though I'd retired a decade earlier. Old habits outlast the body, that's what I've learned. I'd shuffle to the kitchen, start the Mr. Coffee, and stand at the back door watching the neighborhood come alive. Mrs. McKinney walking her terrier. The high school kids cutting across my lawn even though they pretended they weren't. And the mailman Gary, who always shouted, "Morning, sir," even when it was raining sideways. I liked those rituals. They reminded me I was still part of the world. Margaret used to say the house looked lived in, not messy, which was her polite way of telling me she wished I'd pick up my tools. After she passed in 2017, lung cancer, the kind that creeps up on a person who never smoked a day in her life, the house started feeling too big. I tried to fill it with routine. Grocery trips to Safeway every Thursday, a standing breakfast at Denny's on Saturday mornings, 2 eggs over easy, hash browns, bacon, no toast. Church on Sundays at St. Mark's, mostly so I didn't forget how to talk to people. And then there was my budgeting routine, the one I followed for decades. Every 1st and 15th of the month, I'd sit at the dining table with my checkbook, calculator, and a yellow legal pad. My handwriting wasn't pretty, never had been, but it was mine. Blocky, definite, no nonsense. Bills, deposits, balances. I knew every number down to the cents. I'd learned to track every dollar back when I was a young father who had more month than money. Back then, losing track meant the lights went out. Funny how that discipline became the very thing David tried to weaponize against me later. I wasn't perfect, though. The stroke I had in late 2021 left me slower on the left side and tired more often. I forgot names sometimes, not important ones, just the neighbor's cousin or the name of a movie I'd watched as a kid. But that wasn't dementia. That was getting old. Normal old. I knew that. My doctor knew that. But David, oh, he saw opportunity. Before he turned into the kind of son who'd steal 60 grand from his own father, we'd been close once. When he was little, he used to fall asleep on my chest watching Mariners games. I coached his little league team for 3 years. And when he got into trouble at 16, drag racing down Pacific Avenue, I was the one who bailated him out and paid the court fines. I told myself he'd grow out of the selfishness. Some boys do. He never did. Still, I tried. Even after he divorced his second wife and asked me for money just to get back on my feet, I helped. 1,000 here, 500 there. Nothing I couldn't manage. Every father wants to believe his kid will turn things around. You don't stop loving them, you just stop expecting much. And then the stroke happened, and he saw something in me he'd been waiting for: weakness. The first crack came quietly, a few forgetful questions he asked me at Thanksgiving. "Dad, did you take your meds this morning? You sure you paid the utilities?" I brushed it off. I thought it was guilt, maybe even concern. I didn't know it was reconnaissance. One night in February after the stroke, he came over with a grocery bag just to help out. I was grateful, stupidly grateful. We sat in the living room watching an old Clint Eastwood movie, and he asked casually, "Do you ever get confused, like the timeline of things?" I laughed because I thought he was talking about the movie jumping between scenes. He didn't laugh. "Dad," he said softly, "it's okay to admit you need help." It sounded like compassion, but when I replay that conversation now, I hear the hunger underneath it. I didn't see the danger then because I didn't want to. He was my son, my flesh and blood. You don't look at your child and think, this is someone who would rob me blind while pretending to tuck me into bed. But that's exactly what he became. The thing about getting older is that everyone assumes you're fading. They start explaining things twice. They start looking at you instead of listening to you. They start watching for mistakes like buzzards circling roadkill. And if you're not careful, you start believing them. I almost did. For a little while I wondered if maybe I was slipping, because David made it sound so believable. He'd ask if I remembered conversations we never had. He'd say things like, "Dad, we talked about this," with that same gentle tone you use on someone after a fall. I started doubting myself, the way old men do when their kids talk to them like they're already halfway gone. But then I saw the truth the day that bank letter came. In a single moment, all the fog he'd been trying to put in my head cleared. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was spiritual. It was the kind of wound that goes deeper than the lost money. And here's what you need to understand, the part I haven't told anyone else. Before he stole from me, before he tried to declare me incompetent, before he weaponized my age against me, I still loved him. I loved him so much it blinded me. But love doesn't stop revenge, it fuels it. And by the time June rolled around, I knew exactly what I had to do. I had to play into the weakness he believed in. I had to let him think I couldn't remember a damn thing. I had to give him the rope. Because a man only realizes he's dangling when the drop begins. You know, looking back now, the first real warning sign didn't come from the bank statement, or even from David's sugary voice when he talked to me like I was drifting away. It came one cold March morning, weeks before he sat at my kitchen table and took my checkbook like he was doing me a kindness. Funny how the brain remembers things differently once betrayal sharpens the picture. What felt like a small irritation back then now looks like the first loose thread in a sweater ready to unravel. I'd woken early, 5:40 a.m., the sky still a dull gray, and shuffled down the driveway in my slippers to grab the newspaper. When I bent to pick it up, I noticed the garbage bin wasn't where I'd left it. It sat crooked on the curb, lid hanging open, bags torn. A raccoon maybe. I cursed under my breath, grabbed the bin, and started sorting through the mess. That's when I saw it. A torn envelope from Columbia Federal addressed to me but opened, not ripped by claws. Split clean across the top. My stomach tightened. I stared at it a long moment, the cold biting at my ears. Someone had gone through my trash. Someone who knew what they were looking for. I brought the envelope inside, sat at the kitchen table, and tried to stay calm. Maybe the wind had blown the lid open. Maybe some stray kid had rifled through the bin looking for cans to recycle. I told myself a dozen excuses because the alternative, the truth, was too painful to face. Around 9, David called. "Morning, Dad," he said, voice bright, too bright. "I thought I'd swing by later, help you with a few things." "What kind of things?" I asked. "Oh, you know," he replied casually, "little stuff. Maybe go through your mail, make sure everything's up to date." The hairs on my arm stood up. I didn't mention the envelope. I wanted to hear how he'd talk if he thought I knew nothing. So I asked, why the sudden concern? "You're still recovering," he said gently. "I'm just trying to help. You forget things sometimes." There it was again, that careful planting of doubt. I didn't challenge him. Not yet. I needed to understand the size of the hole he was digging. He came over that afternoon wearing that bright blue mariner's hoodie he practically lived in. He put 2 grocery bags on the counter like a man offering tribute: milk, cereal, canned soup, cheap peace offerings. He moved through the house like he owned it, humming to himself, tidying things I didn't need tidied. At one point, he picked up a stack of mail on the coffee table. "You opened these, right?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't remember." He sighed just loud enough. "See, Dad, this is what I mean. You're trying, but it's a lot." He slipped one envelope into his jacket pocket, the motion small, practiced. He thought I didn't see it. I did. The tiniest crack of sunlight on the edge of the paper. He was choosing what I should or shouldn't look at. "Which one was that?" I asked, feigning a foggy tone. "Just junk mail," he said quickly. "Nothing important." The lie slid out of him too easily. But the real punch came 2 days later. I was at Safeway, Tuesday morning, the store quiet, the smell of bakery bread drifting down the aisles. When I went to pay, my debit card got declined. Twice. "Try it again," I told the cashier, heat crawling up my neck. She ran it again, declined. I used my credit card instead, but as I walked to my car, groceries cutting into my hands, something twisted inside me. I'd never bounced a payment in my life. Not once. I sat in the driver's seat, breathing hard, staring at that same card like it had betrayed me. That afternoon, I called the bank. The woman on the other end, her voice polite but bored, said, "It shows here your daily withdrawal limit was reached yesterday." Withdrawal? I didn't make any withdrawal. Yes, sir. $800 from the branch on Steel Street. I wasn't there. There was a pause. Do you have anyone with access to your account? My throat tightened. I said nothing for a moment. Then, yes, my son. She cleared her throat. You may want to speak with him, sir, or come in to review your account. That night I sat in my recliner, lights off, the house humming in that lonely way old houses do after dark. My heart kept beating too fast, like it knew something my mind wasn't ready to accept. I stared at the front door, half expecting David to walk through it with another bag of groceries and another lie tucked in his jacket. When my phone buzzed, I nearly jumped. A text from him. "Dad, did you remember to take your pills tonight? Just checking on you." Not long ago that might have comforted me, but now it felt like surveillance. I typed back, "Thanks, son, I took them." His reply came 5 seconds later. "Good, I'll come by tomorrow. We should talk about your accounts. It's getting harder for you to manage things." I sat there a long time staring at that message. My hands shook, not the acted shake I used later, but a real one. Fear isn't something a man my age likes to admit to, but I felt it that night. Not fear of losing money. Money can be replaced. I was afraid of losing myself, piece by piece, to someone I loved. But under that fear, something else stirred. Something old. Something from the part of me that spent 2 decades in a mill where you learned fast who had your back and who was waiting for you to slip. A thought came to me, cold and clear. If he thinks I'm slipping, I'll make him believe it completely. And then I'd let him walk himself straight into the grave he was digging for me. Before I went to bed, I whispered to the empty room, "David, you're crossing a line you'll never find your way back from." But he didn't hear me. And he didn't stop. Not even close. I still remember the exact sound my screen door made that morning, an old metal groan, like the house itself was warning me about what I was walking into. It was April 14th, 2022, cold but bright, the kind of morning where the sun lies to you about how warm it is. I just poured a cup of Folgers and sat down at the dining table with that yellow legal pad I'd used for 25 years of bill tracking. The stroke had slowed my handwriting, but not enough to confuse me. Not enough for this. What I saw didn't belong in my life. It belonged in someone else's nightmare. My checking balance was supposed to be around $42,000. That morning, it read $11,783. At first, I honestly thought it was a bank glitch, or maybe I was reading the numbers wrong, my eyes still adjusting. I checked again, and again, same result. My hands went cold, the kind of cold that starts in the bones. I clicked the activity list. There they were, transfer after transfer, each one a little bolder, $400, $700, $1,200, then a jump to $5,000, all labeled the same, external transfer 4421. I stared at that last 4-digit code like it was a loaded gun. It meant nothing to me and everything at the same time. I whispered into the empty dining room, "No, no, no, no." You know how in movies a character drops a glass and it shatters in slow motion? That's what my chest felt like something delicate and old and trusted inside me had just slipped off the edge of a counter. At 9:03 a.m. I called David. He answered with that fake cheerful voice he used whenever he wanted to sound helpful. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" "Are you busy?" I asked. I'm a little confused." I let my voice wobble. Let it sound tired, uncertain. I needed him off balance. I needed him confident. "Oh," he said, immediately softening. "Want me to stop by?" "Yes," I said. "Something's wrong with my bank, I think." He showed up 20 minutes later, wearing that same mariner's hoodie, coffee in hand, the picture of a concerned son. "What happened?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from me. I pushed the laptop toward him. "Can you tell me why my balance is so low?" He looked at the screen for half a second, too quick for someone seeing it for the first time, then exhaled like this was all some sad inevitability. Dad, we talked about this. My heart clenched. Talked about what? You're having trouble keeping track of things, he said softly. Remember, I told you I'd handle your bills and transfers so you didn't get overwhelmed. He said it so smoothly I almost believed him. Almost. I don't remember that, I whispered. He reached across the table, resting his hand on mine like he was comforting a dying man. That's what I mean, Dad. You forget. And that's okay, but it's why I've been helping. Helping Jesus Christ. So you made those transfers? I asked. He sighed, leaning back like this conversation pained him. Yes, Dad, I told you I moved some money to keep it safe. You agreed. I agreed, I echoed, letting my voice sound frail. Yes, he said firmly, you don't remember. A statement, not a question. Something snapped in me right then. Something ancient and stubborn, older than empathy, older than fatherhood, older even than the anger itself. A simple, unbreakable truth. I was being erased. Right there in my own dining room, by my own son. What was it for? I asked quietly. All that money. A savings plan, he said quickly, too quickly. An investment, something for later. For who? I asked. For us, he whispered, but his eyes said otherwise. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table or demand my money back. Instead, I lowered my gaze and let him see exactly what he wanted to see. A confused, broken old man who needed him. I'm sorry, I whispered. I don't remember much these days. His shoulders relaxed, just a hair but enough. It's okay, he said, softer now. I've got you, Dad. He didn't notice the moment his phone buzzed in his pocket. But I did. He glanced down at the notification, barely a flicker of his pupils, before tucking the phone away again. I caught the glimpse. A name. One word. Megan. His new girlfriend. The one he swore he wasn't seeing anymore. The one with the expensive taste and the bankrupt ex-husband. And that told me everything. The money wasn't safe. It wasn't in an investment account at all. It was being spent, burned, funneled into someone else's future that didn't include me. My heart didn't break then. It hardened. I looked up slowly. Thank you for taking care of me, son. I don't know what I'd do without you. He smiled. I memorized that smile. I would need it later when everything fell apart. But the true shattering moment didn't happen until after he left, when I made myself open my email. There in my inbox was a message from Columbia Federal Security Department. Timestamp, 6:14 a.m. Your password was successfully changed. And underneath it, if you did not authorize this change, please contact us immediately. I hadn't changed a damn thing. My son had locked me out of my own money. I put my trembling hands on the table, not acting this time, and whispered, David, what have you done? For a long time I just sat there, the house settling around me, the refrigerator humming in the background, the world suddenly too loud and too quiet at the same time. You want to know the truth? That moment wasn't just betrayal. It was burial. But he'd buried the wrong man. The days after I discovered the password change felt like slipping down a long, dark staircase, one step at a time, never sure when the next drop would come. You ever walk into a room and forget why you went in there? At 76, that happens sometimes. But this wasn't forgetfulness. This was confusion crafted by someone else's hands, my own son's hands. And once that kind of doubt takes root, it spreads fast. The morning after the email, I tried logging into my account again just to see if maybe, by some miracle, I'd typed something wrong. Same message, incorrect password. My throat tightened. My first instinct was to drive to the bank and sort it out in person, but my left leg had been giving me hell since the stroke, and the idea of hobbling in there only to be told I must have forgotten my own login, I couldn't face it. Not yet. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, the one Margaret and I bought on our 25th anniversary, tracing my finger along the grain in the wood. I tried to think clearly, rationally, but betrayal has a way of fogging the mind worse than any head injury. Every sound in the house startled me, the thump of the furnace, the tick of the kitchen clock, the distant rumble of delivery trucks. I felt like the world had suddenly become too big for an old man living alone. It wasn't just the bank fallout, it was the silence. David didn't call that day, or the next. Normally he'd text at least once pretending to check on me, but now that he had control, now that he thought I'd surrendered, he disappeared. The kind of silence that isn't accidental, the kind that comes from someone too busy counting what they've taken. By the third day, I noticed something else missing, my checkbook. I'd set it on the credenza by the hallway 2 nights prior. I remembered that clearly. I even remembered the sound it made when I dropped the pen beside it. But now it was gone. Not misplaced, gone. That's when the paranoia started creeping in. Had he taken it during his last visit? Had he copied my information? Was he planning something else? The walls felt closer, the house colder. I kept picturing him out there somewhere, telling Megan how easy it had all been, how gullible his old man was, how the money was already spent. I didn't sleep more than an hour at a time that week. I'd wake up sweaty, heart pounding, convinced I'd heard footsteps in the hallway. Once I even grabbed the old Louisville Slugger leaning against the closet and checked every lock in the house. 3 times. I don't know whether I was afraid of someone breaking in or afraid of who I'd become if someone did. By Friday, I couldn't take the not knowing anymore. I drove to Columbia Federal, hands clamped tight on the steering wheel, knees aching. The bank lobby smelled like fresh carpet and lemon cleaner, and the young woman behind the counter looked at me with that polite pity people save for the elderly. "Sir, do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but I need to see someone about unauthorized activity." She led me to a glass-walled office where a man named Tyler shook my hand with both of his, like he was steadying me. He had shiny hair, a perfect tie, the kind of face that hadn't lived long enough to understand what desperation looked like. "What seems to be the issue today?" he asked. "My password was changed without my permission," I said, "and money's missing." He nodded slowly. "Do you have anyone helping you with your accounts, a caregiver or family member?" I hated that word, caregiver. I hated it more than thief. "My son has access," I said. The moment I said it, his expression changed. Pity sharpened to concern. "Well, sometimes elderly clients authorize family transfers and forget." "I didn't forget," I cut him off. "I never gave him permission. I want access restored." He hesitated. "Before we can do that, we need to verify a few things. There's been a note on your account since March." My heartbeat kicked up. "What note?" He clicked through his screen. "It says there were concerns about cognitive decline, and authorization was given for your son to assist with banking decisions." "I never signed anything," I snapped. He lifted a printed form from a folder. "Your signature appears here." I took the paper. My signature was on the line. My handwriting, well, a version of it. It wasn't exact, but close enough to fool someone who didn't know my hand as well as I did. My vision blurred, not from age, from rage. "Someone forged that," I said. Tyler sat back like he wasn't sure what to say. "If you believe that, sir, you'll need to file a dispute. But legally, I can't override the authorization without an investigation. Your son would need to be notified." That was the blow that knocked the wind out of me. Not the forged signature, not the withdrawals. The notification. If I challenged him directly, he'd know I was onto him. And if he knew that, he'd hide everything. Move the money again. Cover his tracks. Then he'd sit across from me with that sympathetic smile and swear I was confused. I left the bank feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. The wind off the sound cut through my jacket as I limped to the truck. My breath came in ragged puffs. My hands wouldn't stop shaking on the steering wheel. On the drive home, I caught myself talking aloud. Not praying, not cursing, just whispering, "Margaret, I don't know what to do." Her picture hung from the visor, a little faded, her smile soft around the edges. I touched it with my fingertips, the same way I used to brush her cheek when she'd fall asleep beside me. By the time I pulled into the driveway, everything felt heavier. Even the house seemed to sag under the weight of it. The porch light flickered when I flipped the switch. The air inside was stale, like the air in a hospital room no one visits. That night, everything broke. I'd been sitting in the recliner, watching some old rerun I wasn't paying attention to, when David let himself in with the spare key I'd given him years ago. He didn't even knock. "Dad," he called, "you awake?" I felt something inside me fold, like my spine had turned to paper. He walked into the living room carrying a grocery bag. "I brought you some things." I didn't answer. He studied me with this calculated gentleness. "You okay?" I nodded. "You seem off," he said. "Forget something today." It was a barb disguised as concern, a test. I swallowed hard. Maybe I did. His eyes flicked around the room, taking inventory. "Did you go to the bank?" That hit me like a slap. I didn't realize how closely he was watching me. "Yes," I said finally. "And?" he asked, voice tightening. "I got confused," I whispered. "They said you were helping me. I didn't want to embarrass myself." His shoulders eased. The tension drained right out of him. He believed me. "Good," he said softly. "I don't want you stressing about money." He was lying. I could see it plain as day. But I let him keep talking. He'd say more if he thought I was weak. "Dad," he said gently, "maybe it's time to think about power of attorney, just to make things easier." Those words, power of attorney, landed like a knife in the gut. That wasn't help. That was control. That was ownership. That was erasing me entirely. I made my voice tremble. "If you think it's best." He smiled, actually smiled, proud of himself. "Yeah," he said, "I'll bring the paperwork." After he left, I sat there in the dark, clutching the armrests so tightly my fingers went numb. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Every part of me felt like it was being pulled apart by grief and rage and shame. But the moment that broke me, the moment that tipped this whole story from tragedy into revenge, came an hour later. I found my checkbook. Not where it belonged. Not where I would ever put it. It was in the trash can under the sink, crumpled, stained with coffee grounds. Thrown away. Thrown away like I was. That's when I hit bottom. That's when every lie, every theft, every insult to my dignity crashed down at once. I put my head in my hands and sobbed, not because of the money, not because of the betrayal, but because I realized something awful. My son didn't see me as his father anymore. He saw me as a resource. A dying one. And the worst part, I let him. I sat there for I don't know how long. The house creaked. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Life kept moving while mine felt like it had stopped. But rock bottom has a way of giving a man clarity. When the last tear dried, something in me shifted, something steadier, something older than pain and stronger than fear. I straightened up in that recliner, wiped my face with my sleeve, and said aloud into the empty house, "No more." And though my voice was quiet, it filled the whole room. That was the night I stopped being confused. That was the night I stopped being the victim he expected. That was the night the descent ended and the rise began. You might think the turning point came the night I found my checkbook buried in the trash like a piece of used tissue, but that wasn't it. That was the breaking. The gathering, my rise from the bottom, that started the next morning when I woke up with a headache sharp enough to cut through steel and a clarity I hadn't felt since before the stroke. I sat on the edge of my bed, feet on the cold floorboards, breathing through the tightness in my chest. And right there, with the sunlight barely creeping through the blinds, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to war with my son. I was going to win a war with my son. But to win, I needed help, not the kind you get from family. They'd already failed me. I needed allies, people who didn't see me as fragile, people who'd listen when I said my own son was bleeding me dry. The first person who ended up helping me wasn't who you'd expect. It wasn't a banker or a lawyer or some big-shot investigator. It was Rosa, the night shift nurse who'd helped me during rehab after the stroke. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but her voice came back to me that morning, warm, steady, a little rough around the edges. Back when I was struggling through physical therapy, she'd said something I didn't understand at the time. Old doesn't mean helpless. It means you've survived more than most. So I dug out one of the appointment cards she'd scribbled her number on. I stared at it a long moment before calling. She picked up on the second ring, Mr. Walker, everything all right? I swallowed hard. Rosa, I think my son is stealing from me. There was no hesitation. I'll come by this afternoon. When she arrived, 5:17 p.m., carrying 2 takeaway cups from some coffee place I'd never heard of, she didn't sit down like she was visiting. She sat down like she was staying until she got to the truth. "Tell me everything," she said. I told her about the forged signature, the bank letter, the missing money, the way David spoke to me like I was fading away. And as I talked, something changed in her posture. Her shoulders squared, her jaw set, the way someone looks when they realize the fight they're about to step into is bigger than they thought. "Financial exploitation is abuse," she said firmly. "This is common, too damn common, but you're not going to handle this alone." I tried to laugh. "What can I do? He has everything, access, my accounts, a forged signature. Hell, the bank thinks I approved it." Rosa leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "You're going to outsmart him, piece by piece, but first we gather evidence." Evidence? The word hit me like cold water. "I don't know anything about digital stuff," I admitted. "That's why," she said, smiling faintly, "we're bringing in someone who does." That's how Zach entered the picture. Zach wasn't related to me. He wasn't even close to Rosa. He was her nephew, a lanky kid in his late 20s who wore an oversized hoodie and carried his laptop like it was a limb. He worked some remote IT job that paid him too little for knowing too much. When he shook my hand, he said, "Don't worry, Mr. Walker. No one's too old to learn how to burn someone down with documentation." Rosa smacked his arm for phrasing it like that, but I liked the kid immediately. That first night, Zach sat at my kitchen table for nearly 4 hours, fingers flying across the keyboard while I sat beside him with a notebook, trying to keep up. "Your son made mistakes," he said without looking away from the screen. "Sloppy ones." "Like what?" "Well," he said, scrolling, "he changed your account password, but the IP address logged to his home Wi-Fi, and he accessed your accounts from his phone 8 times in 2 weeks." My breath caught. "Is that enough to prove something?" "Not yet," he admitted, "but it's a start." He printed everything, the login timestamps, the IP addresses, the transfer records. He kept every sheet in a cardboard folder he labeled DW case. I didn't have the heart to tell him those were my initials, not a detective's. But I'll tell you what, it felt good to see someone taking my side. It felt even better to see, in black and white, that I wasn't crazy. We met again 2 nights later, then again the night after that. Every time Zach left my house, I felt less like a dying man and more like someone sharpening a blade. But the real turning point, what you might call the ignition, happened on a Thursday evening when Rosa arrived with a woman I'd never met. She was small, maybe in her 50s, hair cut short and neat, wearing a gray wool coat and carrying a satchel full of papers. "This is Margaret Chen," Rosa said, "legal aid attorney. She works with elder abuse cases." Margaret sat down across from me. Her eyes were sharp, not unkind but sharp like scalpels. "Mr. Walker, Rosa told me your situation. Before I take your case, I need to know something." She leaned in. "Are you prepared for what this will become? Because once we start pulling at this thread, it's going to unravel your family. This will not end quietly." I thought about that a long moment, about the Thanksgiving dinners gone, about the birthdays, about David as a boy sitting on my shoulders at the Puyallup Fair, about Margaret, my Margaret, who'd want me to protect myself but would have wept at what her son had become. Then I nodded. "He threw my life in the trash. I'm just taking it back." Margaret smiled, not warmly but approvingly. "Then here's what we do. We let him keep digging. We let him think you're weaker than he thinks. We record everything, every visit, every conversation, every suggestion of power of attorney." "Record?" I blinked. She pulled a little device from her pocket. "Washington is a 2-party consent state, but if he's exploiting your vulnerability, the court will allow certain recordings as evidence of coercion." My heart pounded. "You think this can work?" She nodded once. "It will, but you need to be convincing. You need to play along. Let him think the decline is happening. Let him talk. Guilty men talk too much." I'd already been pretending, but now it had a purpose. Rosa squeezed my shoulder. You're not alone in this anymore. For the first time in months, I felt it, relief. Not total, not comfortable, but a flicker of real hope. And yet underneath it, something harder began to form, something colder, a resolve I didn't know I still had inside me. Because the more Zach uncovered, the more Margaret explained, the more the truth became clear. David wasn't just stealing money. He was preparing to take everything. My home, my rights, my identity. He wanted power of attorney not for care, but for control. And I wasn't about to go quietly. That night after everyone left, I stood in the living room with only the glow of the porch light through the curtains. My house smelled like coffee and old carpet and faint lemon cleaner, familiar, grounding smells. I touched the wall with my fingertips. I'm coming for you, David, I whispered. Not out of hate. Out of justice. Out of survival. Out of the simple truth that I had let him take too much already. Now it was my turn. You know, people think the hardest part of revenge is the moment you strike. They picture some big showdown, voices raised, proof slammed on a table, gasps from the room. But that's the movie version. Real revenge, the kind an old man like me can survive, is quieter, slower. It's a long game of letting the guilty man believe he's the smartest person in the room right up until the moment he realizes he is. And by late May, I'd gotten real good at playing that part. Every morning started the same. I'd shuffle around the kitchen like my bones were made of chalk, fumble with the coffee filter, mutter to myself about forgetting things I hadn't forgotten at all. If David had cameras hidden somewhere, I wanted him to see exactly what he expected. But when the sun went down and the house settled, I straightened my back, steadied my hands, and reviewed the notes Zach printed, login logs, IP addresses, transaction records. Margaret had me documenting everything on a cheap spiral notebook like I was preparing for trial. Maybe I was. The real setup began one Tuesday afternoon, when David stopped by without warning. Dad, he said as he walked in, waving a manila envelope like a prize he'd won. I brought something important. I was sitting at the dining table, staring at a pile of mail I'd already read twice. I let my eyes drift, unfocused, let my shoulders sag. What's that? I asked softly. Just some paperwork. Don't worry, I'll walk you through it. He sat beside me, too close, smelling faintly of cologne he couldn't afford. He opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents. The top one read durable power of attorney. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression blank. What's this for again? I asked, even though I knew damn well. So I can help manage things, he said. You've been struggling, you forget things. You told me you were scared. I nodded slowly, letting my gaze drift toward the window as if something outside had caught my attention. In truth, I was giving Margaret's little recorder in my shirt pocket a clear line of audio. He tapped the line for my signature. Just sign here, I'll take care of the rest. The gall of him, pushing legal authority into my lap like a menu at Denny's. I picked up the pen, let it hover. My hand shook. I made sure of it. I don't know, I whispered. What if I mess something up? You can't, he said gently. That's the point. I'll handle everything. You just need to trust me. Trust, coming from a man who had siphoned off $60,000 before breakfast. I stared at that paper so long he grew impatient. His knee bounced under the table. Dad, come on. This is for your own good. Right on cue, I let my eyes well with manufactured confusion. David, did I already sign something like this? I can't remember. He froze. For a second, real fear flickered across his face, fear that maybe he'd pushed me too fast. Maybe someone else had gotten to me. He covered it quickly, but I saw it. Saw the way he swallowed hard before answering. We talked about it, he said carefully, but we didn't sign anything. That's why we're doing it now. A lie, a smooth one, sure, but still a lie. I set the pen down with a trembling hand. Can we do it later? My head hurts. He sighed, a long, irritated puff of air. Dad, you said you were feeling overwhelmed. This is how I help. I know, I murmured, touching my forehead. Just later. He hesitated, then gathered the papers with a tight jaw. Fine, but soon. You can't keep living like this." When he left, I watched him walk to his truck. He rubbed his face before climbing in, worried, frustrated, suspicious. Good. Let him worry. Let him wonder if his fragile old father was slipping faster than he'd planned. Let him stew in uncertainty. Because that afternoon, something important happened. David realized I wasn't signing easily. And that meant he'd push harder. That's exactly what the plan needed. 3 days later, Margaret sat across from me in my living room, shoes off, her glasses perched low on her nose as she reviewed the recording I'd captured. When she heard David say, "You just need to trust me, and this is for your own good," she nodded grimly. "This is coercion," she said. "Subtle, but it's there. We need more." "How much more?" I asked. "Enough to prove intent." Intent, the word tasted like metal. Zach stopped by that evening carrying a new device. "This is a call recorder," he said. "Washington's a two-party consent state, but if he's manipulating you, Margaret can argue diminished capacity and undue influence. That opens exceptions." Margaret shot him a look. "We're not relying on exceptions. We're building a pattern." "What do I say to him?" I asked. "Ask questions only a confused man would ask," she said. "Make him explain. Make him repeat himself. Guilty people always over-explain." "And when he gets frustrated?" I asked. "That's when he'll slip," she said. I nodded. I didn't like pretending weakness. It dug into me like a thorn. But for the first time in months, I felt a spark, small but steady. This wasn't hopeless anymore. It was strategy. As everyone was getting ready to leave, Rosa paused at the door. "He expects you to break," she said softly. "So don't, not yet." "I'm tired," I admitted. "You're allowed to be," she said, touching my arm. "Just don't quit." The next part of the setup came from my end. I called David the next morning, putting a little tremor in my voice. "Son, I got confused about something." He jumped on it immediately. "What's going on? Did you take your meds? Did you eat today?" I forced a small stutter. "I forgot. Did we sign those papers? I can't remember." "No," he said sharply, too sharply. "We still need to. I told you that." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "My memory is just slipping." He softened. "It's not your fault. I'll come by after work. We'll take care of it." The way he said "take care of it" turned my stomach. When he arrived that evening, briefcase in hand like some kind of big city lawyer, he placed the papers on the table again. "Dad, we need to do this," he said. "I can't keep guessing what's going on with your finances. You're making mistakes." "Like what?" I asked gently, recorder humming in my shirt pocket. He blinked. "What do you mean, like what?" "What mistakes have I made?" I repeated. He hesitated, one heartbeat too long. "Well, I mean, you forgot your utilities last month." "No, I didn't," I said. He blinked again. "You told me you were confused." "I am confused," I said softly, "but I didn't forget the utilities." He was starting to sweat. "Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder?" I asked. "I just want to understand." "You don't need to," he snapped. There it was. The slip. The glimpse. The truth. Margaret would savor that line. When he realized how harsh he'd sounded, he changed tone immediately. "I'm sorry. I'm just trying to help." I nodded slowly. "I know." But internally, something clicked. This wasn't desperation. This was control. He wanted authority. He wanted access. He wanted power. And the more he pushed, the more rope he handed me. That night, after he left frustrated and empty-handed again, I sat in the quiet house, the moon casting soft light through the curtains. My hands rested on the table, steady, strong, certain. I knew the plan was working. I knew he was cracking. But more than that, I knew we were close. The next step wasn't just gathering. It was baiting. Drawing him into a corner so tight he'd have no choice but to reveal the ugliness he'd been hiding behind that gentle voice. The real setup had only just begun. There's a strange kind of calm that settles over a man right before he walks into the storm he spent months preparing for. It isn't peace, not the kind you feel at church or out on the porch during summer evenings. No, this was something colder, sharper. The kind of calm a man finds when he finally decides he's done being prey. By the first week of June, everything was in place. The recordings, the forged signature documentation, the login logs, the transfer trail Zach mapped out like a battlefield, and Margaret's legal plan folded neatly inside a manila folder thicker than the Tacoma phone book used to be. All that was left was letting David reveal himself fully, on record, undeniable, irrefutable. Margaret called it the execution phase. Rosa called it finally making the bastard sweat. I called it breathing again. The first move came on a Wednesday morning, when the air smelled like the sound and there was rain threatening on the horizon. I dialed David's number with shaky fingers, not because I was afraid anymore, but because I needed him to believe I was slipping. He answered on the second ring. "Dad, you okay?" I think I messed something up," I whispered, letting the silence stretch. "I got a letter, something about overdue bills." There was no overdue bill. Margaret had crafted the letter herself, printed on plain paper, slid into my mailbox with the precision of a surgeon. David's breath caught. What bills, how many?" "I don't know," I said, voice cracking. "I don't remember paying anything. Maybe it's time, son. Maybe I really can't handle this." A pause, a tiny one, but long enough to hear his excitement kick in. "I'll be right over," he said. "Don't do anything until I get there." "Perfect." I hung up, slipped the call recorder into my shirt pocket, and sat at the dining table with the fake overdue notice in front of me, my hands folded like I was praying. When he arrived, his truck tires screeched in the driveway like a teenager late to curfew. He burst in without knocking. "Dad, where's the letter?" I pushed it toward him with trembling fingers. He snatched it up, scanned it too quickly. He didn't even read it fully. His mind was already elsewhere. "This is exactly what I've been talking about," he said, pacing the room like a man giving a presentation. "You're slipping, Dad. It's happening faster than we thought." "We?" I asked softly. He froze, a flash of panic. "Me, I meant me." But he didn't mean me. He meant Megan. He meant we, as in the couple who thought my money was their future. I let him stew in that slip for a moment before speaking again. "I don't want to burden anyone." "You're not a burden," he said gently, kneeling beside me like he was some saint. "But we need to make sure things are handled properly." He pulled the power of attorney documents from his envelope. "I brought these again. If you sign, I can fix everything." "Everything?" I asked. "Yes, your bills, your investments." "You mean the money you moved?" His head snapped up. "What?" "The transfers," I said, looking at him with feigned confusion. Did I ask you to do those?" His face drained, then flushed, then hardened, guilt, fear, then control. "Dad, we talked about this. You agreed. You said you didn't remember." That line. That precious line. The line Margaret needed. "I don't remember agreeing," I said softly. "That's because you're not remembering a lot lately," he snapped. "That's why I need this signed." There it was. Control. Coercion. Intent. All recorded. But I wasn't finished. "I tried calling the bank," I murmured. His eyes widened. "Why?" "To check my balance, but I couldn't get in. The password was wrong." He hesitated. "I changed it for your safety." "For mine?" I asked. "Yes," he said quickly, too quickly. "You were messing things up, forgetting things." "I don't remember forgetting." He slammed the papers on the table. "Dad, stop. Stop pretending you're fine. You're not. You're confused. You're vulnerable. And I'm trying to protect you." There it was. The mask fully gone. Rosa would have smiled if she'd heard it. Margaret would have underlined it 3 times. But I needed the last blow, the one thing that would seal this entire case shut. So I let my voice crack. "Son, did you take the money because you needed it? You can tell me. I won't be angry." He froze completely, like someone had unplugged him. "What?" he whispered. "Did you take it for yourself?" I asked gently. Or was it for someone else?" He looked away. "Dad, don't do this. I just want the truth." He exhaled, running a hand over his face. And then, God help him, he spoke. I moved the money because you weren't going to use it. You don't need it. And yeah, I used some. It's fine. I'll replace it. But I need control now before things get worse. Worse? Worse as in me still being alive. Worse as in me still having rights. Worse as in me not being the helpless old man he'd been sculpting for months. I let my shoulders slump. If you think it's best, I whispered. He softened again, like betrayal could be repaired with a gentle tone. Dad, it is, trust me. I do, I said. But inside I didn't. I felt nothing but fire. Slow burning, steady, righteous fire. When he left the room to take a phone call, Megan, of course, I whispered into the recorder. I have everything now. The setup was complete. The evidence was locked in. And David had no idea that he just buried himself. What came next wasn't setup. It wasn't gathering. It wasn't playing weak. It was the real execution. The courthouse. The confrontation. The fall. I'll tell you this straight. Nothing prepares a father for the moment he watches his child fall apart under the weight of their own choices, even when they deserve it, even when they earned every damn consequence coming their way. There's still a sting, deep, old, bone level. But by the time we reached the courthouse that Friday morning, any softness left in me had been sanded down to something hard and unyielding. The sky over Tacoma was the color of wet concrete, low clouds pressing down like they wanted to keep the whole city quiet. Rosa drove me, her beat-up Honda rocking in the wind as we crossed the 11th Street Bridge. She kept glancing at me, her brow tense. You sure you're ready? She asked. I nodded. I've been ready a long time. Margaret was already waiting inside the Pierce County courthouse, papers tucked under her arm like weapons. She didn't smile, didn't greet me with small talk. She just looked me in the eye and said, "Today we stop him." I felt steady, old but steady. David arrived 15 minutes later, walking in with Megan close behind him. She wore expensive heels she couldn't walk in, eyes sharp like she was auditioning for a role. David looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, jaw tense. He didn't expect to be here, not like this, not summoned. When he saw me sitting upright in that wooden bench, not confused, not frail, not fading, he blinked. Twice, like he couldn't trust what he was seeing. "Dad," he murmured as he approached, "what is this?" I looked at him evenly. "We're here to talk about my accounts." He swallowed hard. "Why did you bring them?" He motioned at Margaret and Rosa like they were intruders. "Because I needed help," I said calmly. Megan scoffed. "This is ridiculous." Margaret turned to her with a lawyer's smile, thin and lethal. "Are you representing him?" "No." "Then stay quiet." David shot her a glare. "You don't talk to her like that." "You can speak for yourself if you want," Margaret said, "but I imagine you're going to want a lawyer soon." His face went stiff. He didn't respond. The clerk called us back to a small room. Not a courtroom, just a mediation space with bare walls and a table too shiny for its own good. The mediator, a gray-haired man named Willis, folded his hands. "So," he said, "we're here to discuss a concern of financial exploitation. Mr. Walker," he nodded to me, "your counsel says you have evidence your son accessed your accounts without permission." I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Margaret slid the folder across the table. Login logs, unauthorized password changes, transfers, a forged signature, audio recordings, coercive language, attempts to secure power of attorney through manipulation. She spoke like she was reading grocery items off a list. Cold, precise. David stiffened. "This is insane, Dad told me." "Play track 3, Margaret said. Zach had queued them up perfectly. On the little speaker, David's voice crackled to life. "Dad, stop pretending you're fine. You're not. You're confused, you're vulnerable, and I'm trying to protect you." Then another clip. "You won't need the money. I'll replace it later." And the worst one. "I changed the password for your safety." David's face drained of color. Megan shifted beside him, her confidence leaking out like air from a punctured tire. "That's taken out of context," he said weakly. Willis raised an eyebrow. How so? David opened his mouth, closed it, rubbed a hand over his face. I could see it, the unraveling beginning right there in the fluorescent light of that stale room. I was helping him, he insisted. He's confused all the time, he forgets everything. He told me he wanted me to manage things. I leaned in slightly. What did I forget, son? His eyes flicked to me. For the first time in months, I didn't look like a man who needed protecting. I looked like a man who'd been watching, a man who'd woken up. You forgot, he stammered. Dad, you don't remember what you forget, that's the point. Name one thing, I said quietly. He stared at me, jaw trembling. No words came. The mediator scribbled a note. Margaret calmly set down the final document. Bank records show $60,000 removed, not invested, spent, gone. David's shoulders sagged. I was going to put it back. On what income? Margaret asked. Silence. That was the moment. Not the yelling. Not the accusations. That silence, his silence, was the exact second the facade collapsed. He looked at me then, really looked at me. His eyes were red, his voice thin. Dad, why didn't you just tell me you didn't trust me? I held his gaze. My voice didn't shake. Because you stopped deserving my trust long before I realized it. His mouth trembled. I could see the little boy he used to be flicker for just a second, lost, small, scared. And damn me, part of me still wanted to reach for him, still wanted to fix it, still wanted to be his father. But fathers can't protect sons who turn into thieves. The mediator coughed. Given the evidence, I'm recommending immediate suspension of all access privileges, full restoration of account control to Mr. Walker, and a referral for investigation. Megan suddenly stood. David, let's go, this is a setup. No, he whispered, I messed up. She froze. What? He didn't look at her. I messed up. And just like that, she was gone, heels clacking across the tile as she stormed out, leaving him to carry the weight alone. After it was over, after the mediator left the room, David remained seated, shoulders hunched, hands limp. I stood slowly, leaning on the table for support. My knees ached, my heart ached, but I stood anyway. Before I walked out, he looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. Dad, can you forgive me? I swallowed hard. The answer hurt more than any betrayal. I don't know, I said, but I won't forget. He nodded, defeated, broken in a way money couldn't fix. When I left the room, Rosa slipped an arm around me. You did it, she whispered. But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Because justice isn't the same as peace. Unraveling a man, even a guilty one, leaves threads everywhere. And when I climbed into Rosa's car to head home, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Living with what my son had become. And living with what I had to do to stop him. I didn't sleep much that night after the courthouse. Men my age don't usually sleep deeply anyway. We drift, we doze, we wake when our bones ache or the house settles. But this was different. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain tapping the gutters, replaying every word David said, every lie, every excuse, every moment he'd looked at me like I was fading into the background of my own life. And yet, even after everything, I still felt the echo of who he used to be. The little boy who held my hand crossing 6th Avenue, the teenager who hugged me after his first heartbreak, the young man who cried at his mother's funeral, gripping my coat like he was afraid he'd disappear without her. That's the thing about being a father. You carry the whole person, not just the version standing in front of you. And sometimes, that makes the truth hurt more than the crime. But pain or not, I knew what had to come next. I woke early, made coffee, and sat at the dining table, the one constant through every version of my life. Margaret called around 9 to tell me the bank had restored my access. She kept her voice steady, professional, but I heard the pride behind it. They've flagged the account, she said, and they'll freeze any attempted withdrawals from him. You're safe now. Safe? Funny word for a 76-year-old man sitting alone in a house that suddenly felt like a fortress and a tomb at the same time. Thank you, I said quietly. There's more, she added. The bank is forwarding everything to the state investigator. You won't have to push this. It will move on its own. I didn't say anything at first. I just breathed, slow and deep. This isn't revenge anymore, she said gently. This is justice. After she hung up, I spent the day cleaning the house. Not the rushed kind of cleaning people do before company, more like reclaiming. I picked up the checkbook from the counter and set it back in its rightful place. I organized my bills. I wrote a fresh budget on my yellow legal pad, just like I used to. I even fixed the loose hinge on the cabinet, something David had promised to do a year ago and never did. Every nail hammered in, every page reorganized, every drawer straightened felt like stitching a part of myself back together. Around dinner time, Rosa stopped by with a casserole, chicken and mushroom, the kind my Margaret used to make when the weather turned cold. She didn't stay long, but before she left, she hugged me tight. "You're stronger than most men I know," she whispered. I didn't feel strong, but I nodded anyway. After she left, the house settled into that familiar quiet. No truck pulling into the driveway, no manipulative phone calls, no gentle, syrupy lies dripping from my son's mouth. Just me, my house, my life. The investigator called 2 weeks later. He asked me questions, simple ones, painful ones. He asked if I wanted to press charges. He asked if I understood what this could do to my son. And I told him the truth. He did that to himself. David never called me again, not after the mediation, not after the investigation started, not even after they froze his accounts and sent him the formal notice. He didn't yell. He didn't apologize. He didn't fight. He just vanished. Some men fall loudly, others just fade. One afternoon in mid-July, I drove out to the waterfront and parked near the edge of Ruston Way. I rolled down the window, breathed in the salt air, watched the gulls circle over the sound. My bones ached, but my mind felt clear, clearer than it had in a long time. I thought about what had been taken from me, not just money, not just dignity, but the simple belief that your own child will always choose you over their own greed. That belief was gone, and I had to live with that. But I also thought about what I still had. My home, my independence, my rights, my name, my damn mind. And those were worth fighting for, worth every step I took, every trick I played, every ounce of strength I had left. When the sun started dipping behind the hills, painting the water gold, I whispered something I hadn't been able to say until then. I survived. Not without scars. Not without losses. Not without regret. But I survived. Later that night, when the house was dark and I was climbing into bed, I reached up and touched Margaret's picture on the nightstand. "I hope you would have been proud," I whispered. The room didn't answer. Houses rarely do, but something in my chest eased like a knot pulled loose. Justice isn't perfect. It isn't clean. It doesn't give you back what you lost, but it gives you enough to keep going. Enough to stand tall. Enough to breathe freely. Enough to be yourself again. And that, at my age, is worth more than $60,000. It's worth everything.